paper, which is entitled Cluster Concepts and Structured Lexical Entries, and the presenter is Carlos Benavides.
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Carlos Benavides, and yes, no problem. As you can see, we're going to talk about cluster concepts and structured lexical entries. Let me get my paper here. So these are the key ideas of the presentation. What are cluster concepts to begin with, right? They are groups of semantic conditions that help determine the prototypical meanings of words. That is, cluster concepts help define words. The interaction between cluster concepts and lexical entries has not been explored in detail. Lexical entries are very important for language. All languages have words and they put them together into sentences or phrases. So the information in the lexical entry is key for language and communication. So the goal of this presentation is to fill this gap and formalize a relationship between cluster concepts and lexical entries. It is supported by a corpus study, English and Spanish, conducted in order to determine the use of words whose lexical entries may be defined through the use of cluster concepts. It's not necessarily any word that can be defined with the use of cluster concepts. We'll see what types of words they are. And these corpus results, will serve as indirect evidence that cluster concepts are instantiated in lexical entries. Okay, so this is the hypothesis and the questions we have. The hypothesis is that cluster concepts are instantiated in structured lexical entries and can be abstracted away from lexical entries. So they help define the words and they are inside the lexical entries, but they also can form scales actually outside of lexical entries. It is plausible for there to be scales that are anchored in lexical entries, and the scale arises from the information in these lexical entries, and we will see how. We will also explore the consequences of the proposed analysis for word formation and compounding. So, for example, the base of a compound or a derived word can be defined through cluster concepts, and that affects the derivation. So what are the questions for the presentation? Do words that are used as a base for derivation or as compound constituents usually have the prototypical meaning? For example, in the derived word climber, the word climb is the prototypical use of the word. We'll see the example of that. It is not a metaphorical climb, for example. And the second question is, can the proposed analysis explain the phenomenon of family resemblance using only cluster concepts and lexical entries? For example, the word game, which is one of the most famous examples used for family resemblance. So here's a more detailed definition of cluster concepts, okay? So they apply when given a set of conditions. Examples that maximally satisfy the conditions are regarded as more typical than examples that satisfy fewer of the conditions. So for example, the verb climb, okay? It is defined by these two conditions, okay? It's an individual that is traveling upward, and the individual is moving with effortful, grasping motions. For example, when somebody's climbing a mountain, right? So the most likely interpretation of Bill climbed up the mountain in both conditions are met. He's going up the mountain and doing motions as if clambering, right? Now, if we say Bill climbed down the mountain, they're no longer going up, but Bill is still using a clambering motion. So it's not the typical definition of climb, but it's still acceptable, right? And the snake, let's imagine a snake climbed up the tree. The snake is going up the tree, but doesn't have hands and feet to clamber. So it is still acceptable meaning, but it doesn't have both conditions, so it's not the prototypical meaning. As I said, both examples are acceptable instances of climbing, right? Because each fulfills at least one condition, okay? So the default interpretation, Bill climbed up a mountain, in which both conditions are satisfied, is more prototypical, and the others are marginal. However, notice If both are violated, for example, the snake climbed down the tree, the action cannot be characterized as climbing. Okay, here grammaticality may come in. Some native speakers, as I was saying, native speakers can say that is grammatical, but it usually is considered ungrammatical. The snake climbed down the tree. The condition of going up is violated, right? And since snakes cannot clamber, if you're going down, you have to use your hands and feet, and they don't have it. The other condition is not satisfied. It violates both conditions. It is considered ungrammatical and not acceptable, right? So cluster concepts comes from the idea that conditions cluster together to determine the most prototypical reading. And there's an example. I'm going to just briefly say that example, for example, with the word mother, and this satisfies those conditions. And this applies to all types of words, prepositions, adjectives, adverbs, not just nouns and verbs, which is the example with mother and with climb. Okay. Then this is another way, a paper I published in 2023 is another way in which I show that how cluster conditions can be applied, but in this case, forming a scale with the verbs of becoming, such as volverse rico, hacerse responsable, and so on. Okay, so these I showed in that paper that how a speaker knows how to use a word in a given context can be determined by these cluster conditions, just 3. Okay, and I'm going to show you the scale that was used. Here is the scale of the cluster conditions. Okay, notice that the right hand side, hacerse responsable, becomes responsible, and satisfies all the conditions, right? All the conditions are gradual change, long-term change, sustained action that leads to a change. So hacerse responsable, become responsible, it's all the 3 conditions are satisfied. So we could say that the speakers know what verb do I use? Hacerse, ponerse. If this adjective satisfies all those conditions, you need to use hacerse. Let's go to the other extreme for number 1. Quedarse, become astounded. Notice when you become astounded or surprised, it's immediate. It'll take years to become surprised or astounded, right? But to become responsible, it could take years. So quedarse atónito, be surprised, it's almost immediate. So immediately. So it doesn't satisfy any of the conditions. It's not gradual, it's not long-term, and it's not sustained action. So that's the lower end of the scale. Okay, so these conditions, we only need 3, and notice how those 3 we can form a scale. So that's a usefulness of cluster concepts. Okay, now I have to talk of the model I have developed for lexical entries. How is the information inside lexical entries organized? So because that's where these cluster concepts are going to be, right inside these lexical entries. So I'm just going to be briefly talking about these. I know it's a lot on the page. All right. So this the first paragraph is just a description, a brief description of the basis of the slot structure model, which is the one I developed. And basically the model is saying that we have 2 lexical entries. They come together and unify. We're going to show a diagram soon. They come together, and when in our minds, right? When these words come together to form a new word, they unify, and the meanings unify and come together, and now we have a new word. And the lexicon entries are very simple. They just have 3 types of like blocks or slots of information, okay? And that is basically that theory, and that's going to be relevant for how cluster concepts are used. Yes, okay. Sorry. I don't have 5 more minutes only? Okay, I'm going to go very quickly then. This is just one lexical entry for 2, the base colar and then a suffix, and then they come together. These are the rules for the words coming together. And this is an example of how you form the word coladora, the derivative coladora, okay? They unify, and now this is the new entry that shows the new meaning. There's another example there. Compounding as well. When 2 words come together to form a compound, they come together, and the head word, it seems to be like taking all the meaning, and it forms a new word, and when they come together. Most of it is notice semantic information. This is the resulting entry. So this is the main part of the talk, how the cluster concepts are instantiated. Since I have very little time, I'm just going to show you the diagrams, okay? So remember the climb, it has two cluster conditions. One is going up, it is represented there within the bold-faced bars, go path up, and the other is the manner, clambering. They are inside the core meaning of the word. The less prototypical climb, there's only one feature, one condition that is bold-faced. And another less prototypical example. And here, just lexical entries for the words in the scale for verbs of becoming. As I said, I'm going to skip. These are just other examples of other words that can be defined through cluster concepts. For example, book, which can be information, and also the physical book, which also contains information. And finally, family resemblance. The word game can be defined with those four features that are in the core slot that are in boldface. With all we just need these four features, and we can define any game, any game absolutely. For example, Monopoly. Notice in the core slot, Monopoly, the uppercase Monopoly is the meaning itself, the rules of Monopoly, and then this is a typical game that has all those four features in the core. And then we can form scales with all the games, and each one of the columns in the scale can be considered to be the lexical entry for those items. I'm going to skip this because that's just another example of how the scale can be formed with each column represents a lexical entry. Application to word formation. Now we're just going to see some diagrams where the prototypical word like climb, you add ER and you form a new word, but the base was the prototypical meaning, not just any meaning of climb. For example, climber is not, for example, a meaning that is not the prototypical meaning. A climber is a person who usually climbs a mountain, right? For example. That's notice it's very similar to the ones at the beginning, the diagrams. That's the resulting entry. Same thing for compounding. For example, for bird watcher, the word bird is a prototypical word. A bird watcher is not somebody who usually watches penguins. It's somebody who watches robins or that type of birds. And yes, finally, the corpus study. Let me show you some tables. And before the very last item here, the corpus results show that in English, 80% of the words examined are used with a prototypical meaning, either simplex words or derived words. And in Spanish, it is 90%. So this seems to be helpful. When we form new words, we seem to use a prototypical meaning. So these cluster concepts do seem to be doing something. And here are the percentages. Notice on the column on the right, it's a percentage of prototypical meaning out of prototypical combined with marginal. Notice that some of them are 100%, right? All of those words have the prototypical meaning. This is the results with Spanish. Some of them 100% as well. Let me see. I'm just going to mention some of these things about the discussion. So the hypothesis was confirmed. Cluster concepts can be instantiated in structured lexical entries, and they can be abstracted away. And finally, the answers both are the questions were both answered in the affirmative. And there are the references. Thank you very much. Thank you. See if anybody has any questions. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you.
One question that came to mind is
Yes.
maybe a broad one. What do we gain with this instantiation of compounds into lexical entries,
Yes.
theoretically?
Yes.
And the other one was if you found any interesting differences between English and Spanish in your corpora.
Okay. Yes. So the first one, um, the gain is that it helps explain what is really happening when we are speaking, when we are creating new words, especially. What I think this model explains what actually is happening, because other models, for example, just don't explain what happens with all the information in the lexical entries, like the arguments, what happens with the arguments, the participants in the event. So I think that this model helps to explain, it helps explain what's going on in our minds when we are speaking and when we form new words. And these entries are very flexible. So for example, tomatoes are fruits, right? But some people for some people they are vegetables. So in the lexical entry of some people, you have vegetable there in our minds in that lexical entry, and in others it says fruit. That's fine, but there's a slot there for that part of the meaning of that item. So when they combine, it doesn't matter what you have in that slot. When they combine, it's like an automatic process that I try to explain. So these entries help explain that what seems to be that automatic process. It's a combination of something innate, maybe, in that flexibility that is also enabled by pragmatics. Depends on the context. Depending on the context, you're going to fill that lexical entry with that information that the context gives you. And regarding Spanish, what is happening here is that it's very similar to English. The only difference in compounding between Spanish and English is that English is always right-hand compounding, 90-something% of the compounds, and in Spanish there are many left-headed compounds. Maybe about 30%. In that sense, they're different. And I've done studies about derivation and compounding in many languages, not related to Spanish and English, and it's very similar. So it seems to indicate that that's what lexical entries are doing when they unify, when they combine.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A small question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Yes, you have a question. Yes, please.
During your lecture, thank you.
Thank you.
I thought of an experiment.
Great.
Like a native speaker,
Yes.
if they are aware of lexical entries, if they are compound or one word, etc., etc. And I would be very, very much interested in Spanish, English, American English,
Yes.
especially, and Greek, because yesterday I got a message from Latin America, and they
Yes.
said traumatólogo.
Traumatólogo.
And this is a pure Greek word, and I don't think there is in other European languages precisely like this. I mean, a native Latin American speaker, Spanish, they know it consists of two words.
Yes, I think not in that case. Only somebody who studies Greek roots and Latin roots, they would know. The other speakers, traumatólogo is a single word that they learn just like that, and they don't analyze it into trauma and logo, right? Not necessarily. Maybe many speakers who studied. And to answer your first question, very little of some speakers don't even know maybe there's lexical entries. They know there's words in a language, but they don't know. But the evidence in the corpus study seems to show that we need lexical entries, right? They organize our thoughts. And that example I gave you of tomato, right, or avocado, which is also some people think is a vegetable and it's a fruit. In the mind of the speaker, tomato is a vegetable, and unconsciously they have that feature in their mind that this is a vegetable. They say it must be a vegetable, but they don't know that it's stored in a lexical entry in their mind. Yes.
The next paper is the public image of artificial intelligence in memes. And the speaker is Zaneshenko. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zana Senko. Hopefully, my colleague Oksana Ivanova is actually online. And we're here representing Riga Technical University and in particular the Institute of Digital Humanities. And as already mentioned, the topic of the research is dedicated to the public image of AI in memes. Just a second. Okay, so the research examines how internet memes on platforms like Reddit function as sophisticated communicative systems that shapes the public understanding of artificial intelligence. By analyzing the vast collection of image-based content, the study identified conceptual metaphors to reveal nuanced attitudes regarding the trustworthiness and agency of AI. The public perception of artificial intelligence is shaped not only by news reports and policy discussions, but also by participatory digital culture, especially memes. For this reason, memes are a highly relevant source for studying how society perceives AI. Memes are more than just jokes. They are self-replicating units of information that evolve through social selection and provide an immediate reflection of cultural sentiment. Unlike formal media discourse, memes react immediately to technological developments, public fears, enthusiasm, and everyday experiences with AI tools. They condense complex attitudes into short, memorable, and highly shareable forms. Memes function as models of information transfer. In the evolutionary model, memes are units of information that have an independent existence, self-replicate, and are subject to selective evolution through environmental forces. In the digital culture model, internet memes are units of cultural information transmitted from one mind to another, deliberately altered by human creativity, dependent on popularity for survival, and shaped by the culture and society that adopts or rejects them. Because of these properties, memes provide especially valuable evidence for how public opinion about AI is produced, circulated, and transformed online. The aim of the study is to explore the detailed public perception of AI and to show that the perception is far more nuanced than a simple opposition between good and bad. Memes often present AI at the same time as useful and dangerous, intelligent and observed, or controllable and autonomous. The study is guided by two main research questions. Number one, what are the dominant metaphor families through which memes conceptualize AI? And number two, how do these metaphors relate to affective stance and to judgments about AI? These questions are important because metaphors are not merely decorative linguistic devices, they are structure understanding. The study investigates how conceptual metaphors embedded in Reddit memes construct the image of AI and influence judgments about its agency, risk, trustworthiness, and ethical credibility. I will later on show a sort of a table depicting all of that. The research is grounded in conceptual metaphor theory and in the theory of multimodality, which together makes it possible to analyze how meaning is produced through the interaction of language, image, and cultural reference. The corpus that we compiled is 1,000 image-based memes posted between 2018 and 2025 on high-traffic AI-related subreddits such as R machine learning and R artificial intelligence. The memes were retrieved via the Reddit API using AI-related lexical filters. The research procedure combined computational metaphor discovery with human annotation. First, the textual elements of the memes, such as captions and overlays, were extracted together with image tags. Candidate metaphor mappings were then identified by clustering recurring source domain imagery, for example, monster, tool, god, or virus, with target domain claims about AI, such as autonomy, intelligence, or responsibility. In the second stage, each meme was manually labeled for its primary metaphor, effective stance, and implied responsibility. This combined procedure allowed identifying large-scale metaphorical patterns. The findings show that Reddit memes conceptualize AI through several recurring metaphor families. Among the most prominent are AI as agent, which presents AI as intentional and unpredictable, AI as a tool, which frames it as instrumental and controllable, AI as a child, which emphasizes trainability, immaturity, or naivety, and AI as oracle, which depicts AI as omniscient and authoritative. Now, shortly about all four of them. These metaphor families are closely connected to emotional stance. For example, AI as tool is more likely to express pragmatic acceptance and utility. Key finding is that implies responsibility is maintained with the human user, conceptualizing AI purely as an extension of human capability. AI as agent often carries anxiety about autonomy and loss of control. AI is mapped as independent actor, shifting implied responsibility away from humans into the system itself. AI as a child may combine humor with cautious optimism. It lowers ethical panic by framing errors as developmental mistakes rather than malicious intent. And finally, AI as oracle, it often reflects both fascination and distrust, implies absolute authority, creating a dangerous, effective stance. Here, human oversight may be viewed as unnecessary. Overall, the results demonstrate that meme discourse produces a complex symbolic map of AI in which admiration, fear, irony, trust, and skepticism coexist. And here a short table putting it all together, where we can comment perhaps on the risk profile. As for the tool, it is very low, as opposed to the agent, very high, and moderate for child, and actually hidden for the oracle. And the ethical credibility, as actually slightly mentioned before, for the tool, it is user-dependent ethics, agent, system-blamed ethics, child guardian-dependent ethics, and the oracle assumed infallibility. The crisis of AI trust occurs when formal policy treats it as a tool, while vernacular culture experiences it as an agent or an oracle. Some concluding remarks. I still have time? 5 minutes, okay. The applicability of these findings is very broad. The research contributes to media and discourse studies by showing that memes are not trivial entertainment, but meaningful sites where public attitudes towards emerging technologies are negotiated. It is relevant for AI ethics and policy communication because it reveals how ordinary users interpret questions of control, responsibility, and credibility. The study demonstrates the value of combining computational methods with qualitative analysis in order to capture public perception of digital environments. In this way, the research helps explain not only what people think about AI, but also how cultural forms such as memes shape those thoughts. Just for the acknowledgement, the research that we conducted has been supported by the project Language Technology Initiative, funded by the European Union Recovery and Resilience Mechanism Investment and the National Development Plan. Thank you very much. Some references. Yeah.
May I ask you a question very briefly? So did you make this annotation automatically or manually?
No, it was manually. I think I mentioned it.
Oh, it was manually. Okay, sorry, I missed it. Because one of my questions would be if it was difficult to categorize memes because they, they're ironic or they have hidden agendas. Was it always straightforward?
Not always straightforward, of course, but to be honest, my colleague Oksana would answer this question better, as she actually conducted the analysis.
Okay. I was just wondering. Thank you. Which is Gender Inclusive Translation Techniques and Constraints through National Comparable Corpora by Vasiliki Helidoni.
Good morning, everyone. It is a great honor and pleasure to be here today at the International Conference on Linguistic Research and Applications. My name is Vasiliki Helidoni. I am a PhD candidate at the Department of Foreign Languages Translation and Interpreting of the Onion University, and I will present my research entitled Gender Inclusive Translation Techniques and Constraints through National Comparable Corpora. These are the contents of today's presentation. My work embodies the spirit of interdisciplinary collaboration and emphasizes how translation can serve as a tool to promote inclusivity and enhance the dissemination of specialized knowledge in an equitable manner. Let me begin with two key concepts that frame this research: gender inclusive language and gender inclusive translation. Gender inclusive language seeks to avoid exclusion or arbitrary assumptions, to promote the acceptance of diversity, and to prevent the invisibilities of specific gender identities. Gender inclusive translation, however, goes one step further. It does not simply transfer inclusive forms from one language to another. It must avoid perpetuating stereotypical perceptions of gender roles, avoid reinforcing stigmatization related to gender identities, and most importantly, operate within the normative constraints of the target legal and administrative system. This becomes particularly complex in interdisciplinary settings of specialized translation, especially administrative translation and legal translation. In these domains, we are not translating literary nuance. We are translating calls for proposals, calls for tenders, vacancy notices, reports, studies, internal notes. These are administrative documents that can produce legal consequences. In my research, the data were drawn from official public service websites such as gov.uk, Laissez France, and the Avia. And this leads us to a central tension. How can translators promote gender inclusivity without compromising clarity, precision, and legal certainty? My study is guided by two main research questions. Which gender-inclusive language techniques can be adopted or avoided in administrative and legal translation settings within different national contexts, namely the United Kingdom, France, and Greece? How can monolingual comparable corpora of official documents serve as a comprehensive methodological basis for identifying translation solutions that align with its national legislations, drafting rules and norms? These questions shift the debate from ideology to evidence. Instead of asking what should be inclusive, I ask what does authentic institutional language actually do? This study is grounded in corpus linguistics and corpus-based translation studies. Corpus linguistics allows us to systematically collect large volumes of natural data, electronically process representative samples, objectively identify linguistic and translational norms within specific institutional contexts. Rather than relying on intuition or prescriptive guides alone, I analyze approximately 1 million words per national language, English, French, Greek, to ensure corpus representativeness. Each corpus consists of administrative text material to ensure comparability. In other words, one monolingual corpus per country, 1 million words per corpus, with authentic official documents only. For corpus processing and analysis, I used Sketch Engine, which allowed me to extract frequency lists for quantitative keyword analysis and concordances for qualitative contextual interpretation. Keyword selection was informed by national inclusive language guides from the United Kingdom Public Administration, with the UK Home Office Design System issued in 2021, from the French Public Administration with the Guide pratique pour une communication publique sans stéréotype de sexe issued in 2022, and from the Greek Public Administration with Οδηγός χρήσης μη σεξιστικής γλώσσας στα διοικητικά έγγραφα issued in 2018. By combining corpus analysis, national drafting rules, and inclusive language guidelines, I applied a methodological triangulation, ensuring that conclusions are not based on isolated examples, but on recurring institutional patterns. Let us now turn to the findings. I will present 4 major techniques identified in the corpora, distinguishing between techniques that can be adopted and techniques that should be avoided in administrative and legal translation. The first technique that can be adopted is the use of double forms, explicitly mentioning both masculine and feminine forms. Examples include, in English, each employee must submit his or her application before the deadline. In French, chaque candidat ou candidate doit déposer son dossier. And in Greek, ο ή υποψήφιος υποψήφια υποχρεούται να υποβάλει την αίτησή του, την αίτησή της. Corpus evidence shows that double forms are widely used in official documents. They maintain syntactic clarity. They preserve legal precision. They explicitly include both genders. Most importantly, they do not create ambiguity regarding legal obligations. Therefore, in administrative and legal translation, this technique can be safely adopted. The second technique that can be adopted involves adapting grammatical gender to the specific person referred to. Examples include in English, Miss Taylor is hereby appointed director, she shall assume her duties. In French, Madame Dupont est nommée directrice, elle exercera ses fonctions. And in Greek, η κυρία Παπαδοπούλου διορίζεται προϊσταμένη, αναλαμβάνει τα καθήκοντά της. This technique aligns naturally with grammatical systems, avoids generic masculine bias, preserves clarity and referential precision. The corpora show that this practice is already institutionalized in official drafting. Thus, it can and should be adopted in specialized translation contexts. Now we move to more controversial territory. Neutralization strategies such as English singular they, person concerned, candidate person, abstract nouns replacing role nouns are often recommended in inclusive language discussions. Examples include each employee must inform their supervisor in English, toute persona candidata in French, and το ενδιαφερόμενο πρόσωπο in Greek. However, corpus evidence in administrative and legal documents reveals a constraint. While these neutral forms may appear inclusive, in legal drafting they may blur referential clarity, create interpretative ambiguity, obscure who bears a legal obligation. Legal language prioritizes precision over abstraction. Therefore, in administrative and legal translation, neutral word choices are often not recommended when they risk ambiguity. Another technique identified is the alternation strategy, using masculine in one clause and feminine in another. For instance, each applicant must submit her documents. If an applicant fails, he will be notified. Or similar alternations in French and Greek, le candidat doit signer, elle joint à son dossier. Ο υποψήφιος οφείλει να υποβάλει τα δικαιολογητικά, η υποψήφια που δεν συμμορφώνεται απορρίπτεται. This technique appears inclusive at first glance. However, corpus analysis shows that it disrupts coherence, creates referential instability, potentially generates confusion in legal interpretation. Administrative and legal texts require internal consistency. Alternation undermines that consistency. Therefore, this technique is not recommended in interdisciplinary specialized translation settings. To conclude, what do these research findings reveal? First, generic masculine is no longer the absolute institutional practice in the United Kingdom, France, or Greece. Second, gender inclusivity in official documents is possible, but only when aligned with national drafting conventions, legislative clarity requirements, institutional norms. Third, corpus evidence demonstrates that inclusivity is not simply ideological positioning. It is an empirical linguistic phenomenon observable in institutional practice. The key challenge for specialized translators is therefore not choosing between inclusivity and clarity, but achieving their linguistic combination. To sum up, based on monolingual comparable corpora of official documents from the United Kingdom, France, and Greece, techniques that can be adopted are the use of double forms and the adaptation of gender form to the person in question. These techniques coexist with formal legislative drafting constraints. Techniques to be avoided in administrative legal settings are neutral word choices that may create ambiguity and alternation of masculine and feminine forms within the same text. Overall, gender inclusivity and legal precision are not mutually exclusive. However, their linguistic combination requires awareness of national legislative norms, corpus-based evidence, and context-sensitive translation strategies. Comparable corpora of official documents provide a robust empirical foundation for investigating translation solutions that align with national drafting rules. In interdisciplinary specialized translation, gender inclusivity is both a priority and a challenge. And it is precisely at this intersection between linguistic innovation and legal constraints that the role of the translator becomes critically important. Here are the references for my study, and thank you so much for your time and attention.
Any questions?
If there are no questions from the audience, I would like to ask you something that I'm wondering about. So how did you how do you define ambiguity? Is it how methodologically? How did you come to that conclusion? Is it your own? Is it the advice of people who are into the legal world? And also, so this is one question, and the other is, do you feel that translators' preferences are very far away from what should be done in legal documents regarding gender inclusivity?
Okay. Regarding the first question, I was based on the question is based on EU guidelines where legal ambiguity is when we do not know the subject of the clause, and when we prefer neutral word choices, we do not know the subject of the verb, so we cannot understand the person who bears the legal obligations. So we prefer adaptation, adapting the gender form to the person in question, masculine or feminine, or using both genders, masculine/feminine, as an object, as a subject of the verb.
Yes, I understood that from your presentation. It's just that I feel when you use the neutral, for example, ενδιαφερόμενο πρόσωπο in Greek, it's the person who will apply, and could be either a man or a woman, or whatever gender. So why is this ambiguous? I mean, it will be the applicant.
It is a bigger problem with the alternation, for example, when the subject is a male, and then within the same text we use either masculine in one clause, feminine in another, so the reader cannot understand if the applicant is male or a female or both.
Right, okay. And the second question had to do with the preferences and the legal...
Yeah, there are preferences based on the grammatical systems. For example, English translators prefer neutral word choices because the English language is a natural gender language. However, French and Greek translators prefer double forms with slashes or parentheses and alternation maybe because both French and Greek are languages with grammatical systems.
Okay, so you feel that translators can easily abide by these, your advice, whatever your research is postulating?
They must take into account both gender inclusivity and legal precision at the same time. They want to achieve their linguistic combination, not choosing between them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the final presentation of this session. The title is Language Technology in Combating Propaganda, Master or Servant, by Tatiana?
That would be Tatiana. Yes.
Tatiana Smirnova, right? Yes.
All right, so I will finish this morning session for today. Together with my colleagues, we study a lot now how language technology has influenced the contemporary research in linguistics. And so why a rhetorical question, master or servant? So my colleagues brought it about that now AI has become indispensable in language studies and language research. And there is an ongoing debate. So whether we become subjects of a certain influence, yes, or whether we can still use language the way we used to use it previously, or we can use language technology for our benefit and really make more substantiating conclusions on how language is used, circulated, how we use it to influence opinion and whatnot. So our research has been conducted within a large project funded by, you will find the credentials, yes, since as any project-funded research, yes, so we have to say that. We have developed several courses. They're MOOCs, so massive online open courses. So we also considered our research questions in pedagogical perspective. So how can we teach students use language, use technology, and use it for their own benefits? And one of these benefits definitely is ability to process information, not just collect. So all of you, so when was the last time when you read a short summary provided by AI when you search something on Google? So we are taught, somehow pushed, a nudge, so if we use the contemporary terminology, to consume that production. And so here I would also like to quote one of the metaphors, which I extended myself, but the original was not mine. I remember when first Wikipedia appeared, somebody compared it with the digested food. So it means that you do not conduct your research yourself, you do not read paper books, somebody collects data, information, facts for you, and you kind of half processed, yes, but then AI is ultra processed food. So again, you do not know where does it come from, which algorithms select the facts for you. So we hypothesize that especially for language students and those or ICT students who study language data for a variety of applications, it is really very necessary to develop critical thinking skills, high order cognitive skills. So they are there and they should not decline. There is already research, not yet published, recently published on BBC, that people who write their essays, who analyze texts using AI, GPT included, so they cannot even reproduce their own research. So the instrumental research has proved that their cognitive abilities decline in percents, in tens of percents, 20%, for example. So I believe that our research is topical, our research is important, especially in the age of post-truth, when ideology, propaganda, so we are living, unfortunately, in very turbulent times when each party fights for their right, for their own truth, and trying to use manipulative language and algorithms promoting certain agenda. So thus, while developing curriculum for the courses within the Project on Language Technology Initiative, we concentrated on those ICT tools that help rather than substitute human agency in analyzing text, in monitoring sentiment, detecting fake news, combating propaganda, and ensuring that people, at least they feel the need to check the facts, so not relying on what is posted. So this is the list of courses that we have developed. So digital semantics and pragmatics, multimodal semiotics, sentiment analysis, machine translation, entertainment, and machine learning for textual data processing. And so the courses are developed in such a way as to both study classical linguistics, so digital semantics and pragmatics. We start with semantics, we start with pragmatics, we study prototyping theory, we study word formation, we study the types of context, and then we see how technology can help or hinder certain linguistic research. So we study, as I said, so it's very much classical philology rooted, but at the same time with this modern perspective on language technology and kind of development of conscious analysis skills. So seeing is believing. When you see something, is it really true? Is it really so? And thus kind of whether you can be manipulated into believing that some point of view is right. So critical discourse analysis has been long there, so we all know what it is all about, but it has gained new momentum exactly in this age of manipulation, propaganda, and post-truth. So analysis that require further theoretical analysis socially, because manipulation is defined as illegitimate domination configuring social inequality. Cognitively, manipulation is mind control. Well, hello, conspiracy theories, but well, we cannot deny, so that if you hear some piece of news again and again being repeated, being rephrased, so that it can manipulate you. And discursively, manipulation generally involves the usual forms and formats of ideological discourse, such as emphasizing a good thing. So thus, Annie, subject dealing with textual data should cater for one's own cognitive flexibility. So we all are subject to manipulation. We all are subject to marketing, promotional materials, whatever, good living, good eating, healthy lifestyles, whatnot. I don't even talk about political discourse. So we have to develop pure awareness and high levels of awareness exactly in order to remain humans, in order to remain sound. So not reliant so much on the product that we are being fed, ultra-processed. Propaganda. Again, I'm not going to read from the slide. I believe that as Annie, person who is familiar with the contemporary media discourse, with the contemporary media space, we all understand what propaganda is. So even the best of us, I don't know. No, can you name, in your opinion, so which news outlet is free of propaganda? Who do you trust? Can you name me just one? All right, yes. So it's even worse than I thought. So BBC, I don't know what, and any other state-funded news outlet. So I'm not here to judge. So I'm here just to illustrate. So that people, although consuming news, circulating news, acting somehow, so adjusting their behavioral patterns due to certain, let's say, media background. So how many of you started preparing for bad times? So buying extra fuel, buying some products that have long expiry dates, whatnot. So it's all there. Even if we know how propaganda works, we still, unfortunately, sometimes become objects of propaganda. So these would be some of the most widespread mechanisms, tools of propaganda. Reason or common sense, everybody knows that. Logical fallacies, diversion or evasion. So cherry picking, we present only half truths, only the facts that sort of support our opinion, appealing to emotions, using falsehood or trickery, speaking or writing styles by kind of choosing certain discursive practices that make people relate with a piece of news. And the whole lot, so thou shalt not commit any logical fallacies. Technology can be both a master and servant. So there are already tools and quite mature mechanisms, not in their beta versions, but both commercial and open source that can be used for, let's say, automated content analysis that can be used for battling propaganda. Now, for example, like flag shipping, ICT-driven critical discourse analysis, which sentiment analysis, such as Vader, for example, which helps you to identify the keywords, emotionally loaded words. There are plenty of libraries that already allow us to automatically detect manipulative discourse. If we talk about not on the low word level, but exactly on the discourse level, these would be some of the tools like, for example, agenda analysis, topic modeling, which is indeed quite consciously and frequently used to produce news that are going to reach the widest audience and cause a certain immediate predictable reaction. So sentiment analysis again, so you can see that there are plenty of tools. And within the courses, we teach our students, we demonstrate how this technology can help, if not substitute. Yeah, so that is our main message that we try to drive home, that technology should not substitute human agency, should not substitute human thinking, and that over-reliance on technology would always benefit those who own those technologies. So one of the most mature technologies used by Meta, used by Amazon, used by whatever large big tech companies, because, well, they actually have to, because they have been fined for not doing so, it is detecting hate speech. And so based on exactly these, we can see how it all works. Yeah, so there is indeed technology to battle hate speech, to detect cyberbullying, to avoid discrimination, also gender discrimination, misogyny, whatever. So extremism, radicalization. So these technologies are already there. For students, especially those who do not have a solid ICT background, it might be a bit challenging, but the interfaces are becoming more and more user-friendly. But here's the danger again, master-servant. So you rely on a very convenient user interface and you do not adjust and fine-tune the system for your own needs, then you just consume the product. So if the system says, this is hate speech, this is discrimination, this is fake, yeah, so then again, you transfer your human agency to a machine. So here again, so you have to, as a researcher, as a student, as a consumer of news, as an analyst, be able to understand what is behind this technology and use it masterfully. So, concluding remarks. Critical thinking and analytical approach to information processes reduce the risk of being manipulated by disinformation, and knowing how large language systems work and how agenda setting is actually done, and knowing what is GPT as such indeed might help. The audiences are willing to check the validity and transparency of information, are motivated, ready to invest the time and effort to discover the accurate versions of events. And post-truth or emotional interpretation events is one of the major factors making readers susceptible to misinformation. So thus, language technology is there. We learn how to program, we learn how to fine-tune, we learn how to set the parameters that we want when we conduct automated text analysis, but we should remain humans, we should keep writing, we should keep reading by ourselves without transferring this agency to language technology. Yeah. So thank you for your attention, and I'm glad and welcome your would welcome your questions.
Do we have any questions for this presentation?
May I ask a very brief question? maybe you mentioned it and I missed it. So how did you assess these humanistic abilities of the students?
So that is the point that we quite consciously approached this curriculum design questions because we do not rely too much on multiple choice checking. Yeah, so because multiple choice, it is always algorithmic and randomized. So some of the feedback is reflection and self-reflection. For example, there are some interactive tasks that make students go out of their comfort zone. We use branching scenarios where they consider how their choices which they make, what consequence, well, like a game, like a computer game, but here it is kind of linguistic. So perhaps my colleague might, she programmed it. That was a mission impossible. Yeah, so but indeed, it would not imply, very simple answers. So in order to proceed, in order to finish that task, you have to be cognitively flexible and to see how your decisions will lead to different consequences. We also quite actively used like some tasks that stir imagination of the students. For example, using AI-generated pictures for metaphors. So please consider how this metaphor would have been visualized. Please use the tool to visualize that. So again, technology is a servant. Technology is not a master. So you can be more creative. You can understand language phenomena better by using technology rather the other way around.
I think it's very important what you do. And I think it should also move into the academic world.
Yes.
Because now you're talking about our everyday lives and how we are manipulated, but also what happens with research.
Exactly.
That comes out and it's false, and what repercussions we have with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.